Welcome everybody to another Indie Dev Recap video here on the Game Wisdom channel. Every Wednesday we have our Indie Showcase stream where we check out games submitted by developers as a way of showing off a variety of games and raising awareness on smaller titles. And for this video we have more very interesting unique games to show off. As always, all the games played have been submitted by developers and there'll be links to them down below. And if you'd like me to take a look at a game of yours in the future, please get in touch. But we are beginning the night with Neon City Riders. So this is a kind of open world style retro throwback. It is sometime I think in the year 20XX, and we have to save the world as this guy who looks suspiciously like either Jason or Rick from Splatterhouse. And we have to explore this world trying to take out the gangs that have taken over, all while hitting as many 80s references, synth, and other things that you can imagine. And this is one of those games that, in just one of the more shocking twists, it actually got worse the more we played. And that's not something that we usually talk about with games here. The first part of the game introduces us to a somewhat robust tutorial, introducing all the combat systems as well as upgrades that allow you to dash, find secrets, and just essentially get more tech involved with the game. And then at the very end of that tutorial, the game pulls a Metroidvania and removes all those features from you, leaving you with just your normal attack, run, and that's about it. And the story seems to be that you're going to explore the 3 areas and get the upgrades one at a time, but you are free to do them in any order, with of course secrets and bonus collectibles that are tied to specific ones. And the problem right off the bat is that the basic mechanics just aren't that interesting enough to keep the game feeling like well paced without having those additional elements in place. And you're going to see me just wandering around a lot in the footage. And while the game features some really great pixel graphics and the music is on point, the general gameplay just seems to hit every annoying aspect. So there is no greater reason to kill enemies other than to get the money that you need to essentially buy food. There's no experience, there doesn't seem to be any kind of collectibles or crafting, at least in the part that we played. Instead, you're going to have to basically move through these gauntlets of enemies, trying to solve puzzles, all while dealing with the map that just kind of shows you your general area, and still kind of leaves it up to you to figure out just where the heck you are supposed to go. And I'm going to fast forward here, and you're going to see that these environments just all start to look very samey, which is not good when you're trying to remember where something is or what you need to do, and you get the picture. But the real downer of Neon City Riders is that the gameplay itself is just very repetitive. We've talked about before when it comes to pacing and level design in a game and how you don't want to repeat content or obstacles again and again without throwing some kind of change or difference to the formula. And Neon City Riders did not get that memo. Right now you're seeing me having to guide these missiles, which if they hit you, can almost one-shot you. And you're going to have to guide them multiple times in this area, doing the same thing again and again, and that is maneuver around corners, get them to a switch or to a wall, and hit them. And the game will also introduce one-hit kill kind of stealth sections on top of trying to guide these missiles around. And enemies and obstacles, for the most part, will respawn outside of hitting major switches. Now, the game will checkpoint at specific moments in a level, and every time you leave a screen, the game will kind of checkpoint that previous point. The problem is that when you get to larger areas, like the one I am in here, you can be wasting minutes at a time if an unlucky enemy hits you, you didn't properly dodge an attack in time, and repeating things like this. And this game feels like a very bad example of padding out content. Like, there is no need to test the player on guiding these missiles like 5, 6, I think it was worth like 8 or 9 actually, different times doing it. And the game also falls into that ever popular old school trap of, we're going to give you a very generic, very basic goal, and then not give you any idea where said goal is. So prepare to do a lot of backtracking and just having to hit every area at least one time to hopefully have any chance of getting to your next objective. And it really is a shame with this game because it started out so well. And part of the issue I think is that there just wasn't enough content to kind of justify the gameplay. If they would have left me with my powers at the start and then build off of that, it would have, I think, worked a lot better. And perhaps even the weirdest example of this is that they give you a very lengthy tutorial for all your powers, and then none of it technically matters because you're not going to get access to that stuff for, who knows, maybe an hour or plus of additional gameplay. And by the end of our stream, unfortunately, I was just getting really soured on this game. I did manage to clear this section to then be invited to something that could be even more annoying. And this is the problem that I have with the game. I don't know if I took the hardest of the 3 areas first. Again, the game opens it up to be completely non-linear. And just everything about this game feels like they had a really solid idea, but didn't know how to create a full-length game out of it. And again, it's very rare for a game to get worse the more that we played it. And unfortunately, this was the case. When you combine frustrating elements with very limited checkpoints, and then instant death traps, unfortunately the game just basically squandered its goodwill that it earned after a fairly good intro. But with that, we're going to move on from, I guess, our neon lights to our next game. And we are turning to, I guess, what will be described as Yukon Hotline Miami with Bloodroots. This is a game that definitely has the style to spare, but similar to Hotline Miami, I feel like the greater execution is lacking. This is a revenge story with our friend here who was betrayed by his gang and is now on a one-man mission to kill his former friends. And standing in his way is, well, everybody. So, the basic concept is that your main thing is that you're going to pick up just about everything and anything as a weapon. Swords, paddles, fish, the half-cut remains of a former enemy, you name it. I think at one point we get a laser gun, and so on. Enemies will often take one hit, but the game does introduce higher class enemies who will take multiple ones as well. You are one hit away from death at all times, and death will restart essentially the section that you're in. The levels themselves are just made up of a series of these kinds of lock rooms. Kill all the enemies, and you'll be able to move on to the next. The game does introduce little kind of vignettes or special sections where you may have to do more platforming, and there's boss fights as well. And you'll also find secrets. And as you play through the game, the title does tell a very interesting story, especially how the various gang members operated after they betrayed our friend here, and there are definitely some hints at some more disturbing elements of the story. The problem that I have with Bloodroots is that the gameplay itself, in one point, doesn't really evolve enough to sustain itself over the many levels, and when the game begins to introduce more complexity in terms of enemies, the controls start to fall apart a little bit. A major element of this game is kind of keeping your momentum going, That is by either just always having a weapon at hand, being able to transition from like a barrel to a barrel, and it's trying to go over that same sense of flow that the very best elements of Hotline Miami hit. The problem is that the game doesn't really have that same level to it. One of the things that you're going to find very quickly is that your character is kind of useless without any weapon whatsoever. And when you try to hit an enemy with a punch, there is a noticeable delay when you go from the attack to after. Sometimes certain certain weapons will auto-track the enemy, other times you have to manually aim. And the problem is that you are constantly swapping weapons as you're on an arena in Bloodroots. This is not like Hotline Miami where a knife operates the same as a cleaver, which operates the same as a sword, and so on. In this game, every individual weapon has its own feel to it in terms of the speed, range, again that tracking, and etc. And it can become very annoying to have one enemy that you didn't see or attacking you while you're trying to get to a weapon that you can use, and you have to replay the whole arena over again. And the arenas definitely vary in length, and they get longer the further you get into the game. And this can become very frustrating when that one enemy decides to kill you or gets a lucky hit, and then you have to replay the last 3 to 5 minutes again and again. The game does have secrets to find, like I said, but they're kind of in that same category as Hotline Miami, as in bonus rewards that can only really work on on missions you've already cleared. And it is a shame that I didn't really fall in love as much with Bloodroots as I did. But similar to Neon City, it just began to get more and more frustrating the longer that we played it. And we're going to take a quick break, and then we got some more indie games to check out. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. As we move on into our next game, we turn to the oddity that is Bombing Quest. This game is pitched as essentially the Dark Souls of Bomberman style games. And if that isn't an unusual combination for a design, I don't know what is. But the version that you're seeing here is taken from its early access. And the general concept is that we are in this dark and gritty world where monsters have risen to try and kill everybody. And we play as the only dwarven, explosive expert left, who is now tasked with having to save the land. And of course, to do that by placing down many bombs. So, the general gameplay of Bombing Quest is that each area is made up of a series of these little bomb arenas, where your mission is either kill the enemies or kill a specific number. From there, you move around looking for upgrades, story bits, and basically solving the quests that you need to get through it. The game features a very basic equipment system, as you're able to mix and match various artifacts to kind of define a build, such as being able to have more bombs on the field, more energy, etc., etc. And again, this is Bomberman. If you've played any of those games, you're going to be well acquainted to this kind of design of having to kind of plan where you want your explosives to be in time to where the enemies are moving around. And the main thing that separates Bombing Quest from the Bomberman games is that everything is kind of put into this world. So If you die, you're going to return to your previous checkpoint, which could be several minutes of this kind of very slow combat. And ultimately, I think that's what hurts Bombing Quest, at least in the version that I played. That if you're hoping for an evolution on the Bomberman gameplay loop, you're not going to find it, or at least not from what we played. And this kind of gameplay I think it does wear itself thin after a few minutes. The problem, of course, is the fact that because you're dealing with these bombs, it really slows down the pacing of combat. And I don't know if they introduce anything later in, like remote bombs or special abilities. The most that we saw in terms of kind of changing the design is the idea of having boss fights that you'll have to deal with at specific points, and of course the idea of upgrading your character. So, unfortunately, I don't know how well this game is going to turn out, and I'm hoping that we see them do more in terms of evolving it, because if this game is just simply Bomberman, but gritty, I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep people invested in playing it. And with that, let's move on to our final game, and we're going to go on a high note for this Spotlight recap with Sky Racket. A mix of a Breakout or Pong style game, but also with a shmup and kind of very focused on story and level design. This was a game that we talked to developers about when we were discussing the game industry in Brazil. But our concept is that we have to save the universe from an evil guy who of course is trying to take it over. And to do so, we're going to fly through various areas with some very impressive, and I would say to some extent very busy background environments, as we have to use our powerful racket here to clear the way. The game itself is on the shorter side, but it makes up for that with each level having unique elements to it, such as this one having an alarm system. Now, the basic gameplay is that we're able to hit back basically any kind of projectile that is orange, as you saw right there. When the projectile has been hit, we can bounce it back to keep that ball in play. If we keep it in play long enough, it gets stronger and then can do piercing. But the levels themselves are fixed elements, as you're trying to get through while completing bonus objectives that are used to unlock the game's true ultimate final fight. The game also features local co-op, where both players will play at the same time, and they can also share health in case one of them gets taken out. Now, from a gameplay perspective, the basic mechanics do not change from level to level. You're still going to be having to reflect shots, and of course dodge them best you can. But what the game does is really put a lot of the growth on the level design and bosses. And the game features some very impressive pixel graphics, especially for these larger fights. And this is a great example of a game I like to say that it knows what it wants to be. This is not a game you're going to be playing for very deep or very intricate gameplay, but everything in this game feels right. It feels like this is what the developers intended in terms of what they want out of Sky Racket, and it certainly works. And we really did enjoy this game. At some point I want to go back to it and try to go for the mega super ending. If I had any complaints, the backgrounds and the art design do get a little busy. And this can happen especially during boss fights when there's a very engaging or very unique background and you're trying to focus on the shots and the enemies coming at you at the same time. But if you are looking for something that is very different and also a very elevated take on this kind of Pong or Breakout design, definitely give a look at Sky Racket, because I think the game definitely deserves praise for really being a strong example of elevating this kind of gameplay beyond just being Pong, but with like a few little extra bells and whistles to it. But with that said, we're going to wrap up this Indie Dev Showcase video. I would like to thank all developers who submitted games, and we are always looking for more titles to take a look at for each one of our Wednesday night streams. And again, if you'd like to submit a game, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Check out our Discord and Patreon link down below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great night. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.